The Commissioner General of the National Revenue Authority, NRA, Jeneba Kpaka Bangura, is in the studio to talk about NRA's revenue collection strategies to achieve its target, her plans as CG, revenue target for 2024, and her journey to NRA, among other things. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Let's start first by understanding what's NRA's target for 2024.
Thank you for having me. I think this is the first time here. I'm a big fan of you guys, so I'm really glad to be here this morning to have a conversation with your audience as to what we have been doing at the NRA, what we plan to do going forward. So before I talk about the target for 2024, as you mentioned, I was the Deputy Commissioner General for the National Revenue Authority for about 5 years. And in that capacity, I was in charge of all of the reforms. I led the many reforms that we started in 2018 onwards, whereby we automated many of our programs and systems and activities, not only at the domestic tax department, but also at the customs department, and then later on at the non-tax department. So I worked with the team to get that done. And then in 2023, after the elections, it pleased the president to move me from deputy at the NRA to the Ministry of Finance as Deputy Minister of Finance 1. And I was there for about 4 to 5 months. And during that tenure, you know, I supported the current minister in, you know, passing the budget at Parliament and many other things. And then towards the end of the year in December, it also pleased the president again to move me from the Ministry of Finance back to the NRA in the capacity of the Commissioner General. And during those years, I have learned a lot. I mean, I went from revenue mobilization, implementation, to policy. So I got to see both sides of the spectrum. So now that I am back at the Revenue Authority as the CG, effective December, I've been there for 6 months now. It's a pleasure to be back with the family. And it has been a joy for the last 6 months, and a lot has been going on. So for the target for 2024, which is about 48% of what we did in 2023, is about 14.9 billion leones. And just to take you back to 2023, it was a turbulent year. You know, in 2023, we had elections, and then towards the end of the year, we had some security concerns and issues. And then also, we had few changes in CG. In 2023, we had about 3 CG. And then, you know, every year we have Finance Acts. So unfortunately for the 2023 Finance Act, we were not able to fully implement the Finance Act because of all these reasons that I've mentioned, the changes, the elections, and what have you. But through it all, with those challenges, you know, because of the great team that we have at the NRA, we were able to meet our target for 2023, 98%. And I don't think if that is bad. If you were taking an exams and you get 98%, I don't think that is so bad.
NRA has actually had years when not only did the institution meet its target, it actually surpassed its target.
Yes.
14.9 billion. It's a lot of money, actually.
Yeah.
What's the strategy to meet and probably exceed your target this year?
Okay, so NRA has been doing extremely well. And the reason why I say that, I was in Uganda earlier this year. We went to benchmark one of the reforms that we have implemented. And the CG at the Uganda Revenue Authority was actually excited to let the delegation know that for 5 years, Uganda Revenue Authority had not met the target. And it was in 2023 was the first year in 5 years. So I was like, wow. I mean, NRA, we are ahead of the game. So we have many strategies to meet, and also not only meet, but we are thriving to surpass the target. As I mentioned, the reforms have been the driving force behind the revenue mobilization. And if you're following the NRA, as recent as March of this year and then April of this year, we implemented 2 reforms, actually 3 reforms back to back. In March, we did the fuel marking, you know, and then in April, we did not only the circulation levy, which was a reform that was implemented, that was passed in the 2023 Finance Act, but then we also did the tax stamp, which all of this is done in our effort to make sure that we meet our target or surpass the target. And I am pleased to let our audience know that we are working towards meeting the target for the first half of the year. Based on the information that I got yesterday during our weekly revenue meeting, we are 77% towards meeting our target for the first half of the year. So we have about a week, we have 6 more weeks. We have the whole of June, and of course today, to make sure that we meet or surpass that target.
How do you think most of these reforms has helped to improve public trust and credibility?
Well, I believe that making sure, because what the reforms are doing is to remove the middle person.
You're right.
And once you remove that middle person, you the taxpayer or you the service user, you have control over what you're doing. Right. And what we have been doing, we have been encouraging taxpayers to, one, use a system to file. And once you use a system to file and pay, your transactions and your payments are secured. I just want to let the audience know that there was an incident late last year where there is this allegation that a certain banks colluded, you know, to divert funds. And that was done mainly because those taxpayers did not use our systems. They did not pay through ITAS. They went and paid outside of the system. And by doing that, you risk what happened late last year, where funds were diverted. So every time we meet with taxpayers, whether it's the large taxpayers or the small, medium, large taxpayers, we emphasize to them that it is important that you use a system, because the government is spending a lot of money to implement these systems. So it is only important that they use it, because when they use it, there are safeguards. Their funds are protected, and also the government monies are also protected. So there is a huge, huge improvement. And with time, the credibility will continue, because we are working to remove that middle person, whether it's at the bank, whether it's at the NRA, or whether it's even within the staff, the institution, because the diversion takes many collusion. Right. So we are working to make sure that that holds and make it sustainable.
Now, of course, you've talked of several measures that have been taken to ensure that the system is up to speed, to ensure that the system enables the provision of huge revenues that are being generated by NRA. Let's talk a bit about, you know, staff or human capital, you know, capability or capacity. How has that been driven within the National Revenue Authority? Where are we in terms of that? Because to improve the system is one. Yeah. Of course, it should go side by side with the workers know on the system itself and other things.
Exactly.
Where are we as we speak?
Exactly. So staff capacity building is core to our strategic plan. And as you said rightfully, you have all these reforms. Someone has to know how to use these systems. And gone should be those days where we bring in consultants, constantly bringing people to help sustain the system. So what we have done, we are working with partners to just make sure that the systems that we have deployed, our staff are trained, whether locally or internationally. For example, we use Asikuda at customs. And the service provider for Asikuda is UNCTAD. And what we have done, we are working to make sure that we bring them on board, on the ground, not only to reconfigure our systems to implement both the Finance Act 2023 and 2024, but also train our staff. So we are working on that, and we are doing the same for ITAS. We are doing the same for the ECR machines, where we are working with the suppliers to make sure that our staff go in the environment where these systems were developed, so they can be trained, and not only trained, but they become trainers as well. So when they come, they will be able to pass on that training and that knowledge to the other staff. As I mentioned earlier, we implemented the circulation levy. And the NTR, what we have done, we're working with a supplier to develop different apps. So when we implemented, we collaborated with SLRSA to implement these apps. And in doing so, our ICT guys were in the lead. And the reason why they were in the lead, because they are capacitated. They know how to use the system. The developer creates it, and then they pass it over to us, and then we ensure that our team. But you're very right, the systems will not be sustained if our team are not capacitated. And capacity building, not only for the systems that we are developing, but also for other areas, make sure that our HR people are capacitated, make sure that our internal auditors also. So every aspect of our units and departments need to be capacitated to make revenue mobilization a whole.
Madam Commissioner General, with even the pluses that we are talking about at the National Revenue Authority, we know there are still lacunas that are militating against trade facilitation. Will you take us through some of things you consider as lacunas, and how we hope to ensure that trade facilitation is enhanced within the National Revenue Authority?
Yeah. So there are many challenges, not only at the NRA, in every government institution.
Right.
And as you know, the NRA, we collaborate with many MDAs, with businesses, and you name it. So what we have done to just make sure, not only trade facilitation at customs, make sure that the clearance process. Right now we are going through the time release study that looks at how long it takes for a container to leave the quay, and we're working with our partners at the World Bank to get that done. But again, it's not only the NRA. If you look at what happens at the port, you have many users, port users. But what we have done, because NRA, anything that happens, it is the NRA's fault. If Bolori does something, it is the NRA. If the port does something, it is the NRA. So we are taking that leadership to make sure that we bring everyone together to make the processing easier. It has not been easy, but we are working on it to just make sure that trade facilitation is expedited. Because the longer things stay at the port, there is this allegation that the goods are expensive, this is expensive, and all of that. So we are trying to work to make sure that we shorten that time to make it easier for all of the importers that bring in goods.
In terms of the areas of tax generation, revenue generation through taxes, there are areas where perhaps you would assume the NRA is losing, especially with SMEs. We have a growing number of entrepreneurs. Some of these entrepreneurs are not familiar of A, the taxes they're required to pay. So B, you find them not paying taxes, not because they don't want to, but because there is a gap between these growing entrepreneurs in Sierra Leone and the connection to the NRA. What are you doing about it?
So I think you just hit the nail on its head. And that's where taxpayer education comes in. And in the years past, we have come up with different strategies. But for 2024 going forward, it is important that we make taxpayer education the base of improving compliance. You mentioned the SMEs, the informal sector, and they're growing, and I think they're the largest. Granted that 80% of the current revenue that we bring in come from 20% of our tax base, which are the large taxpayers, but the informal sector is growing. And what we have done is to make sure that we bring tax administration closer to them. We are collaborating with UNDP. 2023, UNDP supported us to erect about 4 containers or so around the city. And these containers are containerized offices, to just make sure that instead of a taxpayer leaving Waterloo to come to Middletown to do their tax transaction, register, pay, file, and pay, we brought the office closer to them. So we are doing that not only in Freetown, but we plan to do that around the country. So granted that we have offices around the country, but again, we want to make sure that we spread our wings. So we'll bring NRA closer. And usually what we tell taxpayers, especially those who are not yet in the net, that you're not only coming, we're not registering you to just pay taxes. There are so many other benefits taxpayers or potential taxpayers are losing, especially women, because they are not in the system. So registering them could give them access to finances, to banking, loan, and other things. But taxpayer education is key for me to make sure that we improve. I've also engaged the media. I had a meeting, a lunch, a working breakfast a few weeks ago where I called all media houses for us to get to know each other, because I know the importance that you guys play. You know, so we're working through the media houses to just make sure that we reach as many taxpayers as possible, so they know exactly what is expected of them. Because if they do know what is expected of them, compliance cost will decrease, and of course, invariably, the government will get more money in its pocket.
Where will you want to drive the commission at this particular moment? I mean, your vision for the institution amidst the lot of things that you've mentioned.
So, you know, NRA is a grade A institution, and there are laws and policies and acts. So we just renew our strategic plan, I think early 2023. And then we have other things that guide us, working with the board and of course with our supervisory ministry to take the institution in the direction, not only to raise money, but to do other things. For me personally, my vision, aside from making sure that we meet our target, there's a lot going on. You may have heard in the news that NRA signed a contract to build our revenue house. When I travel to other jurisdictions, revenue jurisdictions, many of them have revenue houses. Currently, we are renting. That's why we are all over the place. Many times when people are coming to see me, they ask, is it Bathurst Street that where are you? Wellington?
Right.
So we are different. We're in different location. So really the goal is to bring all administration and support into one building. So late last year, we signed a contract to build our revenue house. So my vision is to make sure that that comes to fruition in a few years. We also have a lot of assets around the country. So if you pass through Balamoya, we have an office there that was supported at that time, I think, by ECOWAS. If you see the Guinean side of that building, it looks great. You know, it looks like an office. But when you see our side, it's an eyesore. So we are working with my team to make sure that we rehabilitate that building. And then we have a lot of staff quarters right in that Cambia that need rehabilitation. We have a large parcel of land that needs to be protected at the Lunge area. And we have other properties around the country. So it is really my vision, as we talk about staff welfare, for make sure that we staff them are really, really taken care of, to make sure that we improve not only in our offices, but also the living condition of our staff. So it is really my vision, as I said, not only on the revenue side, but to make sure that staff is taken care of. Because I have a strong conviction, when you have a satisfied staff, when you have a healthy staff, you have a productive workforce. And invariably, you will have the revenue coming in.
For the purpose of public education, still on the area of businesses that are supposed to pay taxes, there are people in farming There are people even in showbiz who are show organizers who put events together. Are all businesses in Sierra Leone required to pay taxes, or are there those exempted? Let's get the public education on taxation.
Right. So everyone that operates in this country, or everyone that works in this country, is required to pay taxes. Now, it depends on what you're doing. You mentioned show business. You know, people who are in the show business, you mean, right? Like concerts, if you have a concert and what have you. It depends on the scale. It depends on your turnover, you know, and we work with a lot of these, like the comedians. We support them when they are doing their shows. So it depends on your turnover. But by and large, anyone who provides services, you know, or you work in this country, you're required to pay taxes. It just depends on your line of business, what you're doing, and what is your turnover. So it depends on your situation.
Does that include farmers?
Well, if you're in the farming business, of course. If you're, let's say you're in when you say farmers, you have farmers who are into farming. Like, for example, PC and Son, they're into farming. They're growing onions. Sure. Yes, they pay taxes. They're supposed to pay taxes based on their turnover. So now, if you're meaning that my mom or my grandma who's in a village, who's a farmer, that's a different story. But if you're doing large scale, well, they're not doing large scale farming, and their turnover is not, you know. And besides, we want to encourage them to feed salon, so we will not tax them, not yet, until they become large scale. But we are trying to encourage them. That's why the government, as you may recall, in the Finance Act 2024, you know, the importation of rice, we restore, you know, the import duty. And the idea there is that we will take that money and reinvest it into feed salon, into the farmers, with the hope that they will become large-scale farmers. On
a whole, how would you rate the level of tax compliance in the country across businesses?
So it is not where we want it to be. When you compare us to other jurisdictions, our tax compliance is low in the different tax, like, for example, GST. GST, for me personally, is the worst for now, especially when I keep telling, every time I am on the radio or on the television, I tell the public that the public has to help us bring in the GST simply by asking for your GST receipt. And, you know, we talk about that all the time. We educate, and we are working to put, and I think it was here a few years back where we did the raffle, you know, create an incentive why people should ask for their GST. So the compliance level is not where we want it to be. So we're putting measures in place to just make sure that we improve that. As recent as 2 weeks ago, you know, at the end of the year, businesses, after they have done their financials, they're supposed to submit their final return, which is due by the 30th of April. When we did the analysis, we noticed that not everyone did it. So the ones that did not do it, be it large, medium, or small, we reached out to them. I personally met with them to encourage them, and first of all, find out from them why did they not file. Everyone had this misunderstanding that we thought we should have used our final auditing report, or, you know, so we had a conversation with them, and we educated them that, hey, you can do it using X, Y, and Z document as a placeholder. Once you have your final financial report, you can then go and then upload that documentation. So we called them in and we educated them. So the compliance level, as much as it's low, we're targeting it and addressing the issue by meeting with its relevant.
Is this another area of incentive for tax paying? An incentive could be tax returns. In other countries, there are people who make quite a lot on tax returns. Yeah. How keen is the NRA on using tax returns as an incentive to the taxpayers? Yeah.
So we do have that in the law. You know, I mean, as you mentioned, other countries, other developed countries whose systems, you know, are fully automated, and they can keep track of what you're paying. And as a result, when you do submit, like, for example, in the US, at the end of the year, you get your W-2. because your employer keeps track of the payments that you get. So as a result, at the end of the year, they will tell you, hey, this is what you paid. And that same amount is reported to the tax authority. We're not there yet, although the law does allow for tax return, but our system is not fully automated for us to be able to do. But I totally agree with you. We are an incentive whereby at the end of the year, you file your return. If you overpay, you get a credit. If you underpay, you pay more. Although we do that for our GST returns. So for those who file GST on the regular basis, when they overpay, because they pay in advance. So when you pay at the end of the month, if you overpay, we don't pay you back, but we keep it as a credit in our system. But I totally agree, the law is there, but it's only that the system is not yet there for us to be able to do that.
Madam Commissioner General, are you of the view that the GST needs to be reviewed at this particular moment, taking into account the fact that you rightly mentioned it's not productive as we speak?
Yeah. So what do you mean reviewed? Because
you're not getting the actual incentive that the particular purpose for which you've established the system,
right.
so according to you, it's not, it has not been met.
So what we are going to do, we are going to make sure that it works. Currently, we have systems, we have machines, and it's just a matter of making sure that everyone that has the machine uses the machine. And how do we do that? By effectively and aggressively monitoring it. That is what we have not been doing, and we will have to put a plan together and work with everyone, including the businesses, to make sure that the monitoring works so they can use the machines effectively, and then we'll provide the support to ensure that they use the machines effectively. And for those who do not have the machines, we make sure that they have the machines, not only here in Freetown, but across the country as well. So it is working, and we're not going to reverse, if that's what you mean. We're not going to reverse that policy. We just have to make sure that that reform works by making sure that we monitor, we support, and then we make sure that everyone that has the machine uses it.
If my memory could judge me right, I think after Haja Kala Kamara, I think you're the second woman to have headed that position at the National Revenue Authority. How does it feel like?
It is a delight for me personally. It's an honor, to be the second woman to head that institution. But of course, being a woman and heading such an institution comes with many challenges. But what I am doing is to take those challenges and turn them into opportunities where I can learn to not only grow, but to make sure that I lead the institution effectively.
We have messages on our Facebook page that we would factor into the conversation.
Yes.
Usman Prince Sulaiman Kavoni says we need to give tax breaks to people who are bringing businesses into the country.
Usman Prince Kavoni also says we should do a research on our ports to see what we could do to better manage taxes in shipments, clearance, because you clear goods and commodities, you shake a lot of hands before taking out your goods.
Kavoni again says, he's asking, what system are we using?
Aliu M. Bangali says, the National Revenue Authority has made significant progress in implementing the much anticipated integrated tax administration system, ITAS, that has simplified tax administration in Sierra Leone.
Aliu A. Bangali says the NRA has made significant progress in implementing the much anticipated integrated, I think you just read that,
I think I've read that one. Yeah. Mosiri Jane says, since the days of Baibure, Sierra Leoneans don't know why we're paying taxes.
Lodrick Mass says many big businesses are not paying GST and most are not using the electronic cash register.
Usman Prince Kavoni says we should refund taxpayers at the end of the year.
Kavoni again says, have you grouped all goods and services into categories for tax purposes?
Mohamed El Jallo says, good morning AYV. In the process of taxing SMEs in Sierra Leone is not easy, but I believe that the NRA can apply the bait trap system What I mean by BETRAP system is for the NRA to work with every organizations that organize pitch nights and funding programs for SMEs to make sure that these SMEs that participate in these pitch nights and fundraisers events register with the NRA and comply with all the NRA tax laws.
Lodrick Maas says GST is a major component on revenue mobilization of any nation, and most businesses are deliberately not paying it, and it is holding government back in its development process.
Alim Sise is asking what is the NRA cost to register a land?
Aliu A. Bangali says the system, ITAS, ECR, Asikuda worldwide, has also automated many of the NRA's internal processes, thereby improving the efficiency and the quality of the service the NRA provides to taxpayers.
Mose Janezak is saying, Madam, your message is well educated. Thank you, Ma. I think that's the last for my end.
Thank you. I wish to say thank you to all those who are following us this morning and for their comments. And I think I'm just going to group them. And I like the fact that, you know, the caller talked about GST being a major component. In other countries, GST makes up a bulk of their revenue effort. And for us, that is the goal, to make sure that we make that a major component. And that's why we are going to put different strategies in place to make sure that we improve compliance in that area, because as I said, and I've always said, the GST does not belong to the business person. It belongs to the government.
Right.
And you as a business person, you are merely a withholding agent. You take the money and you pass it on to the government. And I want to say kudos to a few of our taxpayers who actually do not hold on to the money till the end of the month, because the law says you have up to the end of the month to file and then you pay. But there are some taxpayers, as the money comes in, you know, they sweep it. So I just want to say kudos to them. But I want to say thank you to that caller for highlighting the importance of GST. That's why, again, as I said, part of my goal is to make sure that we put a robust strategy together to just make sure that we improve that tax handle. A caller, I'm glad that they mentioned the strides that we have made with ITAS. We are not there yet, you know, but we are working to put measures in place to make sure that we make those systems sustainable. The caller that talks about tax breaks, the government gives a lot of tax break, a lot of concessions to businesses. So if he needs help with identifying some of those concessions, he can reach out to our office and we can help him. But the government does, especially in the mining companies, the government gives a lot of money, you know, to just encourage these businesses. Someone asked about the cost of registering a land. Again, it depends on the size, it depends on the location. So again, if that person needs help, they can come to our office and we'll be obliged to help in that area. The SMEs, we talked earlier about the SMEs. They are large, it's a large pool, but they're very difficult to find, and then very difficult not only find, but to keep in place. So that suggestion that I guess we can have a fair where all of them can come out, and then we can not only educate them, but to make sure that we register, which is very similar to what we're doing with the containers. But I think that's a good idea. We're having a fair, a taxpayer day. You know, you bring everyone out, and then use that opportunity to not only help, but also bring into the net those who are not already in the net. This person talked about the shake hand at the port. You know, this is something that is real, but again, that's why these reforms, you know, because when you remove the middle person, as I said earlier, you will eliminate, you know, the shake hand that he's talking about. And that's why we at the NRA, we are thriving to make sure that these reforms become sustainable. Because if it's not, you always have a middle person, and we want to remove that middle person. I think I've responded to if not all, but to as many as I was able to capture.
Okay, Commissioner General, let's talk a bit about some of the areas of prospects for 2024 and the preparedness of the authority to enhance its revenue generation.
Okay. So earlier I mentioned that we have implemented few reforms this year in 2024, and that implementation was as a result of the Finance Act 2023 and 2024. One key reform that we have done, and that you would notice on your beverages, is the tax stamps. You know, this is something that happens around the world, where you see your drinks, you know, be it water. Currently, we are stamping. If you look at this water, it's stamped. You know, it's digitally stamped. You can see the stamp on it, but we are stamping it not for taxation, but to keep track of our GST. But if you look at the beverages, other beverages are stamped. So that was a major accomplishment that we did earlier this year, and we continue to monitor the implementation of that. And I just want to inform viewers and businesses that when it comes to monitoring of the tax stamps, only NRA staffs are authorized to monitor, because I've heard concerns and complaints that where everyone wants to do NRA's work, you know, people will walk into the supermarket and said, we are here to represent NRA. We want to see if you're stamping the beverages. So I want to make it very clear that only NRA, an NRA employee with a badge to identify him or herself, is authorized to monitor. But that's one big area that we are making gains, and we hope to make gains as we work towards meeting our target. We also are doing field marking. That's part of the reforms that we implemented this year. And I don't know if you guys are following the NRA. When we did the rollout of the field marking, we were at MP station, and we, you know, basically the field marking is just identifying. So currently we have the retail, commercial, and then the concession. So all the mining companies that I mentioned earlier that get concession, they bring in these field, and it's tax-free. So what we do is we market to prevent it from coming back into the market. So we are doing that not only to protect the consumer, but to also protect our taxes. So that's one major thing that we have done this year to just make sure that we work towards meeting our goals. And earlier I mentioned the implementation of the circulation fee, where we collaborated with SLRSA. Whilst we were doing that, we attempted to kill two birds with one stone. We collect income tax on the registration of bikes and kekes. Prior to that implementation of that reform, it was paid by cash, that middle person. So we worked by removing the middle person by implementing the app. So now when you go to register your keke or your bikes, or register your vehicle where you have to pay circulation fee, you don't need to run to the bank. You know, we have a QR code. You can just, you know, snap it, get the app, work what you need to do, pay NRA, and then your process will continue. Based on the data that we have, prior to the implementation of this app, we collected last year about 300,000 on income tax for registration of bikes and keke. For the first 2 months that we have implemented, we have collected about 1.6 million leones. So it's working, and we just have to make sure that these reforms are sustained. And by sustaining it, we remove the middle people in the transaction.
How well positioned is public engagement in your agenda?
Yeah, very much. It is front and center. You know, taxpayer education, public engagement, and as I said, I've started working with the media houses to just make sure that that relationship is built, not only those here in Freetown, but across. So being here is part of my public engagement. So we'll continue to do that, not only me, but my team as well. And I also want to remind taxpayers that this week is GST week, because the end of the month is GST week. We have sent out text messages to just remind them if they need help. We are here to support them. But it is important that they pay their GST on or before the end of this month, the 31st of this month.
And as we round off the conversation, why should people pay taxes?
Someone mentioned Baibure. Yeah, and Baibure, I think the tax, the hot tax,
hot tax
war, you know, because Baibure was concerned that, or had the conviction that they're paying taxes, but they don't know what that taxes is doing. This is not our era of Baibure. Now we see things are happening. We see roads, we see the free quality education, we see electricity, you know. So there are things moving, we see things. And because we see things and we enjoy these services that the government provides, it is the impetus, and that's the reason why it is important that we pay taxes and we pay our own fair share of taxes, so it doesn't become a burden on one or two people.
Lastly, for my end, is the NRA open to partnership?
Absolutely. I think we are partnering with AYV, if that's what you mean. You know, we have our Monday show that we do, and then we have others. But clearly, you know, we are open to partnership because, you know, that's what we do best.
Thank you so very much, Commissioner General at the National Revenue Authority. It's been a pleasure having you in our studios. It's been a solid program this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And it was a delight to spend an hour with you guys, and I look forward to coming back soon.
Sure.